Now that they took our new toys and our shiny bits, what now? Today, we're going to talk about the Ork Detachments. Let's get a recap of our true options and the depth of our codex. As now we've come to realize that we're out of GW's eye, what do you want to run? Let's get some tips, some tricks, rejuvenate those WAAAGH instincts and those WAAAGH fluids, get your guys' weird boy brains flowing, and get some kickstarting going. So we have going forward things I suggest for you orc players just as we get into this video talking about each detachment. I'm going to suggest that you go forward picking 1 to 2 units that you simply want to commit to as an orc player. Identify that, hey, I really like this. Maybe it's what I'm painting on. I just want to be the core of something that I own and collect. Pick these unit combinations. Decide that you want to understand them in depth, as they're a lot likely to change, other than maybe tank busters, for example. They're a unit that might change going forward, as they're still super reliable and something that's really vital to all these detachments pretty much that we're going to be talking about today. But nonetheless, still a tip that I give to even seasoned players right now. Pick 1 to 2 detachments. As you're going to see today, we're going to have 8 detachments we're going to be going over. You're going to have a lot of options, and you're going to even have some overlap here. So therefore, I do suggest you pick 1 or 2 that you favor, that you want to identify with, whether it's Dakka, melee, combined arms, and then you start to kind of pick from there. The example I want to use for this, to get your brains going so you can kind of relate to this, is let's say I want to pick Gaz and X amount of Mega Knobs. So if I'm fine with 3, then obviously that limits, I can pick more detachment based off that. But if I want to pick a nice big 6-man unit alongside Gaz, I'm typically going to go to War Horde or Bully Boys, right? So I've now limited it to 2 detachments. That's one of my combos I want to use. Let's say I also want to use Weird Boy plus X amount of boys. Is it 10? Is it 20? Is it even a Weird Boy? It might be a Warboss. You identify what the example you want it to be. That should help you as we go through this process and get you guys really stuck in. So, of course, as we get stuck in, I want to give a shout out to today's sponsors, the Baron of Dice. They make high quality dice, reliable dice that if you guys want to support us and our mission grow and grow our community, buy yourself some WAAAGH Tactics dice. Don't forget the 5% discount code in the description, because nobody likes taxes. And of course, shout out to Forge Fire Gaming. They make competitive balance terrain, which is what we use at home to make our videos with. It comes with pre-painted slotted acrylic bases, allowing for easy building removal and alignment without sliding off the bases. And I mean acrylic buildings with see-through bases. So shout out to the sponsors. Now let's get back to the video, and shout out to our paint competition winners. So I'm going to start off with the Hunt. Now, this is going to be in an order based off the tier, but as you're going to see, we're going to get into this with some thoughts. So we have the Hunt. The detachment focus is obviously very clearly the Snaggas, right? This is one of those what we would call exclusive detachments, which kind of really tells you what it wants you to play. The enhancements that are the most interesting in this detachment, that should kind of get your brains flowing right when you're guided, if you're interested in it, would be Glory Hog and Proper Killy, right? So a lot of the time we do pick our detachment based off the combinations we have access to, which are then enhanced by the enhancements we have access to. So here we have the Hunt, where we're going to be looking at Glory Hog for that early game pressure, where we can actually get one of our big bricks of Squig Hog Boys, which are somewhat overcosted, which we're going to talk about a little bit more, up the field into a proper staging position to take off that pressure of them being eliminated too early. There are other interesting things like Proper Killy is awesome on a Beast Boss. I mean, everybody knows that a proper Beast Boss and other detachments is always viable, always useful, especially if you have access to sustain. In this detachment, you have sustain critical. You have a sustain 5 plus criticals, and you can also get increased AP for those Snagga boys that go alongside the Beast Boss. So then now you're getting them damage 3 to mitigate any damage reduction, and then damage 3 is just great to just really pull down those high volume wound enemies that we're going to be put it into, as you're kind of limited on choices here. Therefore, anything that's going in needs to do damage. So I find Proper Killy to be very appealing in this detachment. Other useful data sheets that are not, Snagga exclusive would be Commandos. Mandos actually help you for that scouting potential, taking up space on the field. You do have the uppy downy stratagem in this detachment, so you can pretty much pick a kill rig off the field, where at the end of combat, you can put something into reserve. Commandos allow you to kind of end up bringing something down, like a full unit of kill rigs in a different part of the battlefield. Say you're playing Search and Destroy, you get to take advantage of that. You stop somebody from stopping you from scouting. Commandos help you take and can kind of offset that. This game, Zagra, actually, even though he doesn't have the Beast Snagga keywords, he allows you to still kind of pull up that pressure and the pace of this, what we're going to call about the wall timing of the detachment. Zod will give you more choices and more ability to reach different targets, especially because that kind of goes with the other buffs, such as the hunt, which is kind of this version of Oath. It's called the hunt is on, which most people just identify as the hunt version of Oath, where you get to pick something, you get to reroll charges, you get additional AP, and then it enhances your damage on that turn. So that's another very appealing thing, is that I get to offset damage. Now you do get bikers because you do have squigs and kill rigs and a bunch of weird toughness and feel no pain units on the field. You might as well throw some kind of weird toughness scoring unit on the field, but Storm Boys also help with this. Now the wall timing of this detachment typically is quite early. I wouldn't say early as turn 1, because then you're typically going to run too much out of gas, but this is one of those high pace, high pressure detachments where you're going to be putting in the enemy's face early, getting up the field. You're really not that durable to sit out in the open with them. So any openings they give you, you're going to take them. You're going to put bomb squigs into them as you set up and, stage up as you can. You take up battlefield presence by just your ability to declare advance and charges outside of the wall in this detachment. So that's why it's fast paced, because immediately, even if you're not calling your wall turn, that's why I say you don't need it turn 1, sometimes not even turn 2, but typically turn 2. You can still, advance and charge throughout the game for 1 CP with your Snagga units. Therefore, it's high tempo, high pressure. The enemy knows, hey, if he's scouting coming forward, this unit can kind of get off on me, and then the rest of his kill rigs, beast Snagga boys can stage up on me, and it can be a lot of momentum pressure here, right? So it's fast paced. You get to actually offset your AP weaknesses on something like a Squig Hog Poi. Can actually feel pretty cool in this detachment. Like I said, you get to pick yourself up. Redeploying is pretty sick, and then a bunch of bomb squigs and dev wounds potential coming out of this detachment are also interesting. The mere weakness, or something that is very glaring about this detachment, is a lot of the time once you build the list, you say, is this better in Warhorde? I would say just by how it plays out, not necessarily. So there is some play here for you, but you do have to kind of find the passion in it to know what matchups you get your wall timing off better. And the tip for this this detachment, I would say, is a lot of rule of 2. So if you end up bringing 3 of something, you end up running out of points for anything else, it seems, a lot of the time, to simplify it. So if you're going to be really going to the detachment's core, which are its Snagga keyworded units, then once you add the scoring support, once you add maybe like a Zod, or maybe some other kind of combat in there that you want to associate, maybe some kind of Dakka, because now we have access to tank busters, then by that point you really can only afford X amount, maybe 9 squigs in total and 2 units of Beast Snagga boys. So the rule of 2 is something that I always kind of think orcs really take advantage of, but into hunts, you really want to take advantage of what I would call the rule of 2. Now, the exclusivity, sorry, I spoke my English, of the detachment is really one of the other weaknesses, which is something we're going to get into in several of these orc detachments I'm sure you guys are aware of. But that's obviously something that we don't really like to see. The over-costed Squig Hog Boys is also an issue, right? We know Squig Hog Boys cost too much. In my opinion, Mazrak Scragmag cost too much. They nerfed him, and then they also made him still a little bit too many points. He needs to come down maybe 15 even, I would say, to be appealing. And so, this is kind of where the hunt is. Of course, be on the lookout for another detachment video where we go more in depth about each of one of these faction detachments that we're going to go over today, but this is the hunt for now. The keys to victory on the hunt is pressure and momentum, right? Understanding that when to call the wah, how to stage up properly, and know that every time you're staging up, you still have access to advance and charge as long as it's the keyword unit. So keep that in mind. The hunt is on. And we move on. So now we have the Kult of Speed. So the Cult of Speed is something that there's a lot of, whispers about online. People are like, have I found the new tech piece? Is Eldar now going to get run over? Sure. I totally advise people kind of try to figure it out and have some repetitions. And so for the focus of this detachment, of course, is going to be buggies, bikers, and obviously just the fast trucks, Kaptas, obviously the speed free keyworded units, and then the exclusivity of the trike is the only character that can really get any interesting enhancements other than whoever is going to get faster than use, which is the one that allows you to take a Warboss for example, or a beast boss, stick faster than you on him. That means any unit can disembark from a transport, move, advance, and charge, right? So that's pretty amazing because the enhancement allows you to disembark and then advance and charge, or disembark and still charge. So it gives you like the assault ramp essentially ability for that one unit, which is very important in this detachment for the most part. But all the other three enhancements are all limited to just a trike. Now, other valuable units in this detachment, because you're gonna have a lot of units in this detachment. Again, you could consider maybe a Zod, but for the most part, I really actually just advise commandos. Commandos actually allow you to not get parking lotted, blocked off in your own deployment zone where you end up kind of running out of space. They allow you to find places for your shock jumps, for your reserves to come off the battlefield edge if you have to. I do strongly advise that you bring commandos in your Cult of Speed, even though it doesn't fit the identity of Cult of Speed. Now, if you don't have enough buggies, bikers, Coptas, redundancy, because if you're playing this detachment, it is max potential. For the most part, only people that are really hardcore Cult of Speed or speed freak collectors or orc collectors, or you're just playing on TTS, you're probably not going to have max amount of Def Coptas, max amount of bikers to really maximize the detachment to its max capacity of redundancy. Therefore, I would advise, you can slip in a Def Dread, maybe even 2 on your list. You can end up picking Boyz on the list for some sticky objective as you start to move up the field. Of course, you have some sort of preference in melee. Like I already hinted to earlier, when you have faster than use, is one of the most appealing things about the detachment itself. Is faster than use allows you to take a big old brick of 10 knobs, disembark from your truck, have the truck walk up drive up the field, disembark the knobs, walk, advance, charge, and really get all the way up the field in one turn. It just becomes a crazy truck boy style missile that no other detachment has access to. So your preference is either a lot of the time Snagger Boys, Knobs, or Breaker Boys. Now, the one thing is I would say Knobs is my favorite just because I'm always a stickler about volume. Volume in attacks just gives you opportunities. Breaker Boys do obviously offset some of our innate weaknesses. The vehicles, the transport monsters, they're cheaper than a big old brick of 10 knobs, but of course they have the weakness of the Overwatch, and then just beast bosses usually do best when you have access to Stain, but you don't have access to this detachment. So whatever that preference can be, you can fall back to Gaz for some gets as well. So just be open to that. Keep in mind now we have tank busters, so you might even to swap the melee threat for some kind of Dakka threat if you have enough redundancy in bikers, buggies, Coptas already, where you can create screens. Now, the WAAAGH timing, the tempo of this detachment might actually catch people by surprise. A lot of the time, they assume this is a early turn 1, turn 2 wall style detachment. You do not want the enemy to actually force a turn 1 or 2 turn 2 wall out of you as an orc player with this detachment. That's where the Mandos come into play. That's where having redundancy of kind of chaff or buggies that you're willing to let die and just mass amount of units in your detachment will actually help you not have an early wall go off unless it's really like a matchup dependent, such as if you can really get into Tau because of misplaying, or Astra Militarum where you can touch a bunch of units. Yeah, but typically you're not really going to do a ton of damage in this detachment. Therefore, your wall is to take up space, to threaten your opponent for for flipping primary objectives, and just pretty much boxing out of getting anywhere else on the field once you've made contact with them. And they really don't typically know when you bring this detachment that you suck at combat and that you really suck at damage, which is something we're going to talk about in the weaknesses. Therefore, your wall becomes almost like a psychological thing, right? It's where can I end up and how will I be bad touching you with my odd units, my odd stat lines, and my mass amount of units. And then I have that one big knockout blow that can just missile up the field and really devastate you. So really, I like turn 3 WAAAGHs, maybe even turn 4 WAAAGHs out of this army, where I can just stick a bunch of units in your face that now feel no pain, invulns, big dumb bases, so they're taking up parts of the table that you can't get to places you need to score, or enough bodies on objectives to swap primary. And of course, the other stratagems in this enhancement allow you to kind of do cool reactive moves, and then a little bit of throttling on damage that are cool too. So the strength of this attachment is your secondary scoring, because you have so many units, which is your unit count, as well as the fact that you have assault. So some things that will allow you to get into places better and keep kind of the momentum of shooting things up and being a kind of a cagey sort of player. What I would say is, because the exclusivity of the stratagems, it makes it so a lot of the time your bikers, if you have more bikers on your list to do like reactive moves, then it kind of changes the style of gameplay you have. If you have more Coptas, then you actually have something for popping a 4-up invuln on a big brick of Coptas is amazing. Now, another way you actually get damage out of this detachment is the mortal wound potential. So whether it's grenades, whether it's your Megatrack Scrapjet charging into you, whether it's your Coptas flying over you, whether it's just randomly you blowing up all over the place, you actually do want to take advantage of your mortal wound potential in this detachment as well. You do obviously have speed as everything's trying to go, but don't jail yourself. And then your odd stat line and unit sizes. So just this the size of the base. You understand that your base size of your buggy is almost is equivalent to your Morkanaut Gorkanaut, for example, right? It's about almost as big. It's huge. It's bigger than your Def Dread. It's typically better than other armies' vehicles that are 3 times the point cost or 2 times the point cost. So you can actually be dead. The base can actually be a detriment to you as an Ork player if you're not used to it. But once you actually start manipulating your big biker units, your big Def Copter units, to touching multiple enemy units that don't want to be in combat because you've charged your screen and then swung your bikers, or you've turned your buggy sideways and boxed out someone's objective, it can end up getting funny. You just box down a whole lane where you're just like, well, now I have my dumb buggy here, my shock tube Drex that jumped into position. Well, you have to deal with it. And it's toughness and the amount of wounds there. And sometimes people don't have the amount of activation necessary. They're going to overkill your one stupid buggy, and they're not, because they're so focused on killing stuff so hard. So as long as you don't trickle them units too early in the game where they can just systematically pick you apart, and make it so like it's like then you don't have too many units, so on your go turn they really just pick you up, then it's like, okay, you've only committed into my big brick of Def Copters with 4-up invulns. Now in this case, you've associated a lot of damage there. You're not out of position because you went after this one unit, and my other one reactive moved out of the way. So therefore, now I'm willing to wall you, touch your backline units, punch the one frontline unit that you try to do damage into me with, and then now I'm just going to hold tight and continue to score until I run out of momentum. So like I said, the weaknesses: lack of damage, lack of AP, and then the exclusivity of the strats. The keys to victory are typically CP management and then your unit count. So when you write the list, try to have a lot of units on the list. Don't get too focused on offsetting the fact that you don't really do a lot of damage, because the core of your list is that you have a lot of units. And a lot of activations, and then you're going to do damage by association and just typically kill what you think you can, and whatever your most devastating unit is to your army that's like killing you too efficiently, then you're like, okay, 10 knobs go into that and kill you real quick so you can slow down the attrition rate. So with that being said, look out for more possible Cult of Speed content as we do more Ork detachments, and of course, get stuck in lands because red ones go faster. Whoa. Yeah, shout out to that kid. So let's move on to More Dakka, or what some people are calling Sorta Dakka. Now, Sorta Dakka is getting all types of trash online and momentum, all types of direction, where some people are saying it's completely trash, and then some people are saying that people are overreacting because it's still totally good. I'm just going to say that it's totally fine and playable. I don't think anybody's weird for trying to make it work, and I encourage anybody who's having fun with it to continue to have fun with it. And if you're interested in having fun with it, this is a perfect time for us to talk about it. So let's talk about the new focus of the detachment or its strats. What I will say is some of it is still continuous, like obviously Ludus, Tank Busters, and Flash Kits. That was great before. Now it's good now. So it's still good now. You're still going to want to take it. But I think, in my opinion, most people's understanding is the focus of the strats are now focused on Titanic Walkers, and Death Treads, for example. The kind of stratagems access they have to, and then how the assault keyword works, and then the wall itself works. You're actually going to take advantage of your walkers, your Death Treads. You're going to take Death Treads with like Scorchers, for example, because now they can assault and shoot them. You're not going to be doing the custom Mega Blaster thing that I was enjoying to do. Speaking of torrent weapons, Burner Boys are now on the menu. Yeah, Burner Boys finally got support, right? So in a weird way, this is still Dakka, but it's kind of flamer torrent Dakka alongside typical rockets and shooters. So just have fun with that is to a degree as well. Now, other valuable units that people are kind of overlooking sometimes would be Boyz, Snagga Boys, or just mobs of Boyz themselves. I think 20-man units are still excellent. Zagra himself is still excellent for the same reason that Zod is excellent. He's the pinnacle of that because he's fast. 2 mass OC, can really manipulate primary objectives, manipulate board control. Well, Boyz can do a very similar thing. They're just a little slower, but they hit harder, and they have the strengths in there. And then in this detachment, you can call WAAAGH. So if you can delay the game to get enough CP to continuously call WAAAGH on your mobs of Boyz, and then call an army-wide WAAAGH, and then continue that momentum. After you try to do like a killing blow on the enemy, that could be a strength itself with the Boyz and Gaz, for example. And then Warbikers, I think Warbikers bring a kind of like a different kind of scoring durability, early game choices for your enemy to kind of interact with. Of course, they already have Assault, so then they're not really exclusive for the keywords, but just having them on the list, I think, for scoring alongside Stormboy is totally fine. Now, as for the WAAAGH tempo, I would say just keep in mind that this is a combined arms detachment. So some people get mad about that because you're like, well, I want it to be all Dakka. Well, most orcs are never all Dakka, right? Even the most orky faction and all of 40k, if you just read your orc codex, they're still gonna crump you, right? When they go into the facility to loot the Adamac beakies, you think if the dude comes around the corner, he's like, oh, let me shoot him, he's just gonna grab him by the head and squish him, right? So you can still, get stuck in, lads. And that's why you have a re-rolling wounds stratagem, because units like flash skits, ludas, tank busters, they'll just appreciate that they can re-roll wounds once they actually do this combined arms assault. So the strengths of this stratagem are obviously the strengths of this detachment are obviously the stratagems. You're not getting sustain 2 anymore, but sustain 1 alongside of the stratagems feels really nice. I think people shouldn't overlook this. We've always wanted to ignore cover, get additional AP in shooting, have a WAAAGH on demand, and then ability to reroll wounds when someone's on an objective. Those are just really good things that you can really take advantage of as an Orc player. If you're running Breaker Boys, and now your Breaker Boys are typically so unreliable, well, in this detachment, you can declare a WAAAGH on them with their Warboss, get up the field, someone's on an objective, you reroll wounds. That becomes outrageous damage when you're wounding a vehicle on 4 and then rerolling wounds. With all your damage 3 stuff, it'll be great. And your Warboss as well. So they can punch up in a way that in the different detachment they never can. So enjoy that. The strengths is the high potential WAAAGH damage. I would even say that this is, interestingly enough, almost like not nearly as good as Warhorde in its WAAAGH potential damage. I mean, in its damage throughout the game. But on the WAAAGH, because you have sustained WAAAGH from tank busters, which are typically just going to be brought anyways in a lot of different Ork detachments, and then you're also punching into them with the stratagems we just declared with the shooting on top of that, you can end up just spiking really nasty into opponents where you shoot someone down the range with your 1 tank buster unit, delete several of their guns that you typically wouldn't be able to reach in Warhorde, and then you hit them hard enough where you picked up all their screens and one of their, tough, durable, or counter-punching units in the mid-table. Well, now they don't really have anything left at all, and it's a different kind of combined arms that, Warhorde wouldn't typically do, and its spiking potential. And like we're going to talk about with the other comparable Dakka detachments, this is what it does to its degree. So I still want people to be excited about this and not be so poo-poo. Just do what you want to do. What I would also say is the Walker play is obviously pretty fun. Typically, we know that Dread Mob has access to Walker play as well, but you don't really want to blow up your own Walkers as they're really not that durable as they are. Therefore, hey, you take away some of that, and you can really enjoy Torrent and Custom Mega Blasters. It's almost like think of yourself as almost playing like Salamanders to a certain degree, but as Orc. Not exactly the same, but as you close the distance, these weapons can get more proficient, and then you can charge in and fight them. So, something that we can still love, because who doesn't love a nice burning boy? Now, the weaknesses is the reliability. You're waiting for the WAAAGH. You're really waiting for someone to get an objective sometimes. You don't have anything to really throttle your offensive output on the outside of the WAAAGH turn, besides a couple strat and the 1 strat for the WAAAGH, which just doesn't really feel that great, because you can just not have the CP for it at that point, or to do everything you want to do because it's too early in the game, or the enemy's smart enough to just be like, I'm just not going to stand on an objective, and you can't really roll wounds on me, and then you can't kill me, and I can still pressure you with just aggressive staging, and you can't really dig me out. So there's still weaknesses there in the reliability and the durability of our giant walkers, even though they're cool and they're priced appropriately, kind of. I think they get to go down a little bit, but hey, I'm an Orc player. I think that they're just kind of easy to pop and kill with how the game's kind of working out right now with Oath and being able to focus fire down enemy vehicles a lot. It's in the meta, so yeah, durability doesn't feel great. They are matchup dependent. There's some armies that this is going to feel better into than others. So, keep that in mind as you're playing it out. If someone can pressure you early, I still think Sword of Dakka is going to have the same pressure as Dakka, where enemies that close the distance, like World Eaters, for example, could kind of still be annoying, but we'll see if they even exist anymore in their current state. And then CP manipulation, because this is such CP hungry kind of detachment and it doesn't have, kind of buffs other than Grass themselves, you can just end up being taken advantage of if someone brings like an Agent of Vect where they can just get in the way of you once you get in the mid table and you're like, oh, well, I can't declare a war on that unit anymore because now it's 3 CP. It's like, okay, there we go. And just keep in mind that the keys to victory are damage by collective, right? Damage by association. A lot of the time it's going to be multiple units shooting at the same unit and or that those same units that shot at the same unit might now group up and charge a different unit and do damage by association or as a collective. So it does take good planning as you as an Ork player to kind of make up for all that. Your unit sizes, getting lines of sight, getting your charges off in the proper orders. You don't block yourself out, and still taking advantage of what this detachment has to offer. So keep a lookout for future videos on Sword of Dakka because I think there's still more to get into this, but this was a quick site conversation about that. Now we move on to the counterpart, the Dread Mob. So for those who were really poo-pooed about how Sword of More Dakka got nerfed and maybe lost its appeal or its zeal, keep in mind that a lot of the stuff that was the core, the fundamental, the foundation of what was known as More Dakka already existed as Dread Mob. So if you're really hell-bent on playing those things, you can play them here, or you can play a different style of that because, like we talked about before, they still have access to that. They still have access to other strengths in More Dakka in itself as a detachment. So here, the focus of the detachments and the strengths are typically like mech infantry or mech supported infantry, walker support, which actually includes killicans, which is actually great for this detachment. If you're a killican liker, lover, whatever it may be, Dread Mob is your best detachment for killicans. And it's your best detachment for Stampa. And I'll explain why as we go on. Now, that being said, the Gretchen themselves are also very, very valuable in this detachment, which I'll go into as well as we go on. Other valuable units that we've seen are still Flash Gits, still Ludas, and then some sort of combat threat. You don't always need that, just depending on the kind of skew or stat check you want to do. There are, as we talk about that, how you could just bring mass volume of bodies and wounds in this detachment. But there are also times where you just need something like a counterpunch for any good melee army as an Ork player, where you need to take advantage of your, as any good gun line as an Ork player is, you need something to punch enemies off you, and a reason for enemy to respect your wall. And in Dread Mob, that's why you'd kind of bring some sort of combat threat, but not always, depending on how much you're really pushing that stat line. Now, I put combined arms and then kind of accidental. I should have erased that. And this timing of this army's WAAAGH or its tempo, a lot of the time is actually more of a defensive thing because of the mass amount of grots you're likely to have on the list, how you're going to use Zod, and then how you're going to actually expose your gun line means Dread Mob can end up acting as a defensive WAAAGH sometimes, or it's really just because you're really trying to take up space in gun lines after you've shot what you want to shoot. Now you want to charge, pick up that little screen so that you can kind of make up the distance to start moving again, because you do lack assault. And sometimes you're just going to run out of transports and have just a lot of stuff on the field. So the WAAAGH timing can act more as a defensive thing, because for the most part, if you're running the most successful version of Dread Mob, you're going to have just a redundancy stat line of Ludas, Tank Busters, Flash Gits, and then mass lines of Grot OC. So when we're talking about the strengths of this list, Battle Line Grot is the strengths of this list, and then reactive 12-inch Zod is another one of the core strengths of this list. Now, there are really cool stratagems on this list alongside that reactive move, because keep in mind when it says your typical movement for the Gretchen unit, so typically it'd be 6, but because Zod's movement is his 12 inches on the WAAAGH, means if once you declare that WAAAGH, if Zod's not in combat anymore, then you can just end up reactive moving 12. So it just gets really atrocious for the enemy if they misplay that, or if you can maximize that as an Ork player. Of course, when you have Overwatch, you are overwatching with the button. So in this case, you can choose sustain, lethal, and that makes it so you can actually have more options for Overwatch, unlike other detachments that are, still efficient for Dakka and the Ork Codex. This one allows you to have a little bit more options in that, because different units will just simply choose the button. Worst case scenario. Now, the button can be perceived as a weakness and to some Ork players more than others, but it is something you have to account for when you're kind of killing yourself. Now, The damage stacking potential of this detachment is freaking awesome. I have so much fun with it. First, like we spoke about when we alluded to earlier as the walker support, is the cans, right? Something like a 6-man unit of killer cans is going to take you a boatload of CP. It's going to take you 3 CP on your WAAAGH to, possibly rapid ingress, advance and shoot, maybe bigger shells for bigger gits, maybe clanking and claws, so that you can end up getting 4 damage, strength 11 punches on your killer cans. But nothing else in the Ork Codex is going to give you the amount of punches of damage 4 of the killer cans do. And only until recently was that the only option, other than Breaker Boys, that now are the option, right? They were the only option back in the day for something so ridiculous like that. So that also goes for your Stampa, the ability to throttle damage on that. So you can pick one really problematic enemy unit and just nail it down a lot of the time. But you can have an issue with being threat overloaded with toughness, right? Saturation. Something I would say is like Nurgle Demons. I've had an issue with before with this detachment, but that was before tank buses existed. They could help offset that, but then you are kind of under the I hope I get enough 6s here. So that's why having a lot of grots and reactive 12 inches moves are really important to this list. Now, I would say the exclusivity, because you end up paying for a lot of characters, which is the character count could be an issue. If you're adding all the tank busters and you're adding all the solo baby mechs, if you're adding baby mechs though for that potential, you could still be taking advantage of your walkers, right? So if you decide I want to add Morkanaut, Gorkanaut, I only have 1 or 2 tank busters, well, I have to pay for the mech because I want to give them a mech. Or you pay the mech and you just put them with the Ludas, and you pay for the shock attack gun with the tank busters, typically, actually. Then the Ludas are going to be in a better position to maybe jump out and then poke the Gorkanaut, Morkanaut, give him +1 to hit, and then the mech presses the button for the Ludas and they do stuff. And then, so there's other things you can actually get off to help make it not so much a weakness, but it is something you account for when you're like, dang, I got like 6-7 characters on this list. And then the clock, because if you're bringing a lot of grots, if you're bringing a lot of these units that get a bunch of Dakka, and then a lot of them are big units of 10 Ork infantry models, so maybe a bunch of unit of 5-man flash gets, or 10 Ludas, 10 tank busters, or 6 max tank busters, and then a bunch of grots, 22-man size grot units. Ooh, that just really wears on you and your clock as an Ork player, with your decision making, with your stratagem calling. So I do say that you should keep that in mind, and that is what someone would consider a weakness or a valid reason not to play this attachment, because the whole point of this is to encourage you or to tell you the strength, pros, and cons of this. So with that being said, be on the lookout for more Dread Mob videos and videos on that. I was gonna say I had keys to victory. Keys to victory for this one is understanding the weakness of how soft your units are outside of the wall. Now, that means your wall timing being a defensive measure is more important. So the wall timing as a defensive measure is one of those keys to victory. And then also not being hemmed or held back in your own deployment zone. So you sometimes still end up playing for commandos. A lot of the time you're just paying for a lot of grots. And then whatever they throw in your face, you're docking them out of the way and then running up the field with more grots. Or you're reactive moving as they close the distance on you, so grots are still moving forward. So there are ways to kind of offset it, but it does take a cunning get with a lot of time to understand the Dread Mob. So with that being said, we move on to the Taktikal Brigade. So the Taktikal Brigade, is on the menu, boys. It was kind of slept on, kind of forgotten about when More Dakka came out. And these guys got nerfed because we lost one of our orders. People were just kind of like poo-pooed on it, not because they thought it was bad, but because More Dakka was so much more appealing that once we went back to this, we forgot what we had lost, and we felt as though it was the only option left outside for our Dakka potential. I think we have other potential, but this is the one that has the most allure to the Ork community at the moment, and there's good reason for that, but it does take some cunning. So the focus of this detachment strats are typically Storm Boys. A lot of the time, not just the strats, but the characters, because they're giving orders, are very important to this detachment. So you do end up getting a lot of characters on this list too, which some people are fine with Hero Hammer, but then some people get uncomfortable when you start taking 7 characters on the list. And the other strength of this list is actually the choices. I know that seems kind of vague, but as we go through this, you're going to see you're just going to have a lot of choices based off what this detachment gives you access to, which is why it does take good consideration when you're thinking about it's not so linear in this detachment, which is why we brought it up. So other valuable units or gets in this detachment, in my opinion, are still units of Boyz. Units of Boyz, units of Snaggas, maybe disembarking from battle wagons could still feel very appealing on this list. For the battle sealed presence, the ability to protect your gun lines and swing primary objectives. I do still think Warbikers are great for scoring alongside Stormboys if you don't have them, but you would like tank busters, looters, flash kits are obviously still very appealing here. I would say typically for flash kits, you go to 5-man units, other than that one big 10-man unit that goes with the Big Mech and Mega Armor, which we'll talk about in a bit. As for how you would use these units, a lot of the time people play for a bunch of transports, but you don't necessarily always need to pay for a lot of transports if you're maximizing your strategic reserves. Mork's Cunning is something that's really appealing on this detachment. Not the reason you play the detachment, but it is very important. Now, the wall timing or tempo of this, again, you don't typically want to pull this out as a turn 2 wall. A lot of the time this is a turn 3 wall. If you can help it, you can get in good fights early in the game with typically using the access to sustained or lethal. Beast Snaggle Boys feel good in this detachment for those early skirmishes if you got to punch out an enemy vehicle, because they have access to sustain. But the fact that you also have access to lethal means you can also end up punching up with something like a commando unit incidentally with that early pressure, or you can end up punching up with Storm Boys if you give them strength 5 and you accidentally disembark, run up the field, advance and charge, and then give them sustain or lethal into some sort of screen and then consolidate into another enemy unit. It gives you that early pressure where you can kind of delay the wall. So there is options in the wall timing, but typically you're going to hold the tempo back for later wall. Now, the strengths of this detachment are the enhancements, which would of course typically be the Mech Captain, which is the Big Mech and Mega Armor with the 10 flash kits. This is almost the most important reason why you play the detachment. You would almost never not bring this. So therefore, if you're really appreciating what it does in Overwatch, when it can actually shoot, charge, and fight, it feels great. And remember, in this detachment, you get the ability to fall back, shoot and charge, which is fantastic for a unit like this, considering that you're regenning models and you have a built-in invuln. Now, another strength of this detachment is the secret mission play and the secondary play, right? The fact that you get to redeploy Storm Boys, you get to pick up commandos, but Storm Boys are actually battle line is amazing. The fact that you can throw out these dumb chaff units and then stick stealth on them, like a unit of Grots or a unit of Bikers from a big gob mech, or maybe your Gaz or whatever it may be, means that when enemies go to kill those secondary kind of killing units, it takes more commitment, which can kind of over commit them, which would cause them to be out of position, and you can take advantage of that as an Ork player. But typically, because you're bringing transports and units like mechs to give orders, you'll have kind of units built in to do secondaries as well, as long as you don't go too overboard with your damage saturation sometimes. But it's a fine line, and it does take some cunning. So like, I want to say the cunning stratagems, a lot of the time you wouldn't look at the stratagems and say the more Dakka ones might be better in the typical sense of what is known throughout 40k. If I can just take away your cover, if I get more AP, if I can reroll wounds, if I get access to WAAAGH, those are arguably just better. But these are more cunning strats where fallback and charge is amazing. Giving yourself +1 OC on units of Zod or Boyz is crazy. Giving yourself the ability to redeploy on a battle line unit so you can score a secret mission is truly cunning in itself. So that's something that's not to be slept on. And as you become more proficient in the army, you realize that you like every kind of stratagem. It really comes down to your decision generalship. You'll appreciate using general stratagems for grenades or heroics, but then you'll also appreciate using ingresses and just built-in strats to the detachment itself. So very cunning stratagem usage in this detachment based off the options you'll have in the units on your list. Then you have the weaknesses, like I said, would be a high character count, which typically just means you don't have as many activations. So you have a lower unit count on this army. I wouldn't say it's low, because we're still Orks. It's just lower than other ones, like, for example, Kult of Speed. But you're giving it up for good reasons. Still got to include it. Then I would say something like lack of AP is typically something that ends up being missed on the list, right? So you do have tank busters, so it feels good in that. But because you're still looking to do some Dakka damage down the range, your looters and your flash kids don't enjoy it as much, unlike when we spoke about the other Ork detachments, where on paper those stratagems would be more supportive to Dakka. In this one, your stratagem support is really just for your options and your battlefield cunning. So the lack of AP will be felt, which does come down to you and you taking advantage of the Get Finder goggles to ignore cover on one of those units, and then where you're coming in from battlefield reserves. Maybe you get better lines of sight. So yeah, not saying it's weak, just had to point those things out. Now, the keys to victory on this detachment, I would say, is battlefield cunning. Just your ability as an Ork player to, based off your matchup, to know how to use Ork's cunning. when you're building your list. Are you building one of these redeploying? I can redeploy 1,000 points of my army so the enemy can never really nail me down exactly in their deployment, and I can just take advantage of their weak flank and blow through them? Is it I can get options of leapfrogging units, taking advantage of redeploys? Am I taking advantage of the core stratagems of the detachment to flip primary objectives? Am I using tank busters to counter my meta because they have a lot of elite infantry and vehicles? So a lot of battlefield cunning and leadership behind this one. I would say it's really rewarding for the high skilled players, and then if you're getting into it, you might get overwhelmed by the options and the clock and not really see the strength behind it right away. So get stuck in there, lads. Great detachment in itself, and Orks are in just a great place. Be on the lookout for more Tactical Brigade breakdowns, as now we just have more options with data sheets, and the way of the WAAAGH has changed. And we move on to the bully boy. So the bully boys be getting no love sometimes, you know, and I can understand it. But today we're going to talk about why it's still appealing. So the focus of the detachment of mostly the stratagems are obviously mega knobs, and then the war bosses. Very, very strict on the stratagems in this detachment, and the war boss ability is just so you can get access to the second WAAAGH. But if you would have told Ork players 2 years ago that they had access to 2 WAAAGHs, they'd call you a liar. So don't be ungrateful as this can be, no matter what. The fact that this looked even unappealing at all just shows how deep our codex actually is. So even if you don't have any appeal in this, understand that this just shows that we're in a good spot as an Ork faction in itself. Now, other valuable gets in this detachment, you could break it down with boys, wagons, obviously trucks, gas, breaker boys, snagger boys, and some sort of Dakka. Now, you might stop and say boys. Why would you want boys? Now, as we do the breakdown, the further depth of this detachment in a further future video, boys might be able to help with the weaknesses of the detachment, such as lack of OC or kind of pay into certain archetypes. Wagons and trucks just make it so your assets are a little bit more safe, but there are lists out there that don't necessarily need a bunch of transports. Gas is just another way that I would say if you're a newer Ork player in this detachment, or you really want to use gas for a lot of the time, it's a good, simple way to get great value out of him and enjoyment out of him, because he gets access to his WAAAGH twice and you just get to keep it up. Breaker boys, even though they don't get easy access to the secondary WAAAGH and they don't have access to the stratagem, this is just something else that helps offset the weaknesses of this attachment, which is not something else we had before. So don't sleep on that being in addition to our Ork codex. Snaggers can still have their appeal alongside a 1 beast boss with Edbanger, could be kind of our Edbanger. Now, what I would say, or Ed Stampa, what I would say as well is that the teleporter enhancement on the Big Mech and Mega Armor is the most appealing enhancement on this detachment, for the ability to have a rapid ingress for you going second behind 2 WAAAGHs is freaking awesome. So if you can fit it on your list, that's great. If you didn't, you probably still had some kind of on your list. So what I would say here as well is some sort of Dakka. You don't want to have absolutely no guns, so you get outscreened from enemies and you don't have any kind of options. When you look at the strats for additional pile-ins and being able to tag enemy units that don't want to be punched by punching little holes in them and funneling through with knobs and warp mega knobs, which we'll talk in future videos and express how that's done. Guns actually give you options to that. So Dakka gives you options to your combat and maximizing your stratagem. So don't sleep on some sort of Dakka. Now, layers to the WAAAGH. So you have to keep in mind that your first WAAAGH is going to be all inclusive, and your second one is going to be highly limited. Therefore, your first WAAAGH can be inclusive in a different way. One thing that I like to usually include is maybe a unit of mega knobs that don't have a character. They're still going to take advantage of that first primary WAAAGH anyways, but because everybody else is also taking advantage of it, they don't need that character support. They can be the focus of your enhancement of your stratagems that turn, while everybody else is just innately good. Now, that in mind, other layers to the WAAAGH would be maybe something that allows you for board presence, like units of boys or weird boy that's to jumping, that allows everything else to stage up and maybe land more of that damaging blow. Now, the innate durability increase of playing bully boys is also pretty fun too, right? So the fact that you get mega knobs with toughness 6 and actually get some armor saves, your knobs are -1 to wound, and then they're likely with their invuln, and then your breaker boys and tank polishers have 4 up armor saves. It feels pretty nice that you actually get saves and you get a built armor of contempt that you have access to. Feel no pains, archetypes, it just feels good. good beer and pretzel hammer kind of detachment, where I would say if you're just playing casually, somewhat regularly, you can learn the rules in and out, really take advantage of the strengths of this detachment, and then find a modicum of success or a good amount of success, dependent on how competitive everybody else is around you and how much of the most proficient units and combinations you have, or your ability to maximize the stratagems in this enhanced detachment. Fighting on death is awesome. So the fact that it has it in this detachment is really cool and something that helps a lot. So I would say the weaknesses of your ability to spike damage, right? So we talked about how other orc detachments, because you get critical sixes or stratagems for that, really you just get reroll hits and then Gaz's aura. There's not really any good ways to spike damage here in this detachment, which ends up being kind of one of the weaknesses, which is where the breaker boy techs come into play, or maybe even tank busters if you can find a way to split some in. The exclusivity of the detachment is a huge weakness and lack of an appeal, because you really only have a couple units that you really want to use for it. And that's something that is probably very obvious. Then the scoring of this. So once you end up paying for enough damage, sometimes you just run out of stuff. So it would behoove of you to get used to playing with this attachment, because it really teaches you about resource management, because you do need enough damage so you're still respected on your wall, but then you need enough chaff so you can keep scoring or retaining screens against some of those matchups that might put you on the back foot. So keys to victory are maximizing the movement in all phases. So what I mean by that? Typically what I mean by that is your actual pile-in consolidations. And your charges themselves. So with Bully Boys, you're usually going to multi-charge enemy units, because you're going to take advantage of one of your orc units picking up that enemy unit, and then the secondarily one still being able to activate, pile into that unit that was behind that screen, for example, and then fight that as well. So kind of continuing momentum and maximizing movements in all phases, being really proficient in combat, is the key to victory in Bully Boys. Your ability to stage without losing assets early other than your terms, and then the layers behind your wall. So that all goes into maximizing your movement and the keys to victory. So keep that in mind. And Bully Boys are not dead. They're just still finding the way to wall. So be that lad to get stuck in. And be on the lookout for more Bully Boy detachment videos. And we move on to the rise of the Green Tide. So Green Tide is one of the detachments that's either you love it, you hate it, or you've been tide curious. So the focus of the detachment is simply boys. Typically is just boys. You don't really get a lot of variety here, but you do have variety within the detachment for your other options to make it work. And what those things will typically be MSU units of some sort, whether it's trucks, storm boys, flash kits, tank busters that don't have character support, maybe small units of noms, beast snagger boys and contingent, whatever it may be, maybe even a big gas brick if you're kind of getting newly started in a Green Tide. Those are all units that you can end up kind of using as support. Commandos make up for the fact that you can get blocked in with your big bricks. You need places to really to jump with your boys. So with your weird boys. So having commandos already set up to help search and destroy deployments, or those enemy factions like world leaders that want to dogpile into you, maybe Tyrannid, Vanguard fleet, where they get their Broodlord with the Gene Stealers, and they can run into devastating wounds and pick up big bricks of boys. Mandos allow you to offset that and also kind of set the pace, because usually when we're talking about the WAAAGH timing now, when you want the WAAAGH is when you can get kind of the most boys into contact with the enemy, but typically over the midway point of the battlefield line. So, whenever you get to a battlefield and you're playing Tide, you kind of look and say there's a screen is the midline. You want to get to the other side of that line with your boys to any degree when you declare your WAAAGH. So if you can cover that distance and take up that space, whether it's with your WAAAGH timing, your pile-in consolidations, and heroic interventions, that will really dictate the timing of the WAAAGH and the momentum of this army. Now, the strength of this detachment, it's very punishing to your opponents, because your ability to be shot and then surge into them, your ability to regen onto objectives that you didn't naturally start on, your ability to tie their most killy units up in suboptimal conditions when they were not really expecting those stat lines is amazing. Heroic interventions are crazy punishing when you pull them off intentionally, and it's a really high ceiling detachment. So if you're really looking to stress yourself to a degree, as in stress test yourself and get really good wins off and high scoring wins off really good opponents, Green Tide can reward you in that. Board manipulation is the king of this ring, right? The fact that you want to get over that halfway line with your WAAAGH, your Paladin's consolidation, is because you need that board manipulation. You need space so you continue to score. You need to deny the enemy secondary scoring and their primary as much as you can, because a lot of time you are typically going to die and the enemy's still going to score quite well against you to a certain degree as an Ork player, because you're not really killing them fast, so they're still in the game to score. And a good opponent will be able to score with lone ops or really fast units that are running on the field while you're denying them primary, and they're going to be looking to do a secret mission. Therefore, it's behoove you as an Ork player to have total board manipulation and really limit their ability to score while you continuously score yours. So it's not even about just killing them, it's about denying them access to scoring their secondaries and their primary as much as possible. That's where the attrition comes into play. If you like attrition, you like big brain plays where you erode your enemy throughout the whole game, and they're kind of just scratching their head as they go, it feels really, really good as Green Tide to get this going off. Really, really great generalship behind this. And I am biased because I'm a Green Tide player at the heart. Now, weaknesses: lack of damage, lack of AP, going hand in hand. A lot of time people look at this and they go, well, my boys can't kill unit terminator, they suck, I hate this detachment. I feel you. You will be having to take advantage of mortal wounds. You will be having to typically have some other cunning gets or tank busters into your list that you can help to offset that, or just really identifying that that's my problematic unit. My one potential unit to kill them is going to focus on them, or I'm going to deny them and try to delay them as I get stuck in with other units and still deny scoring. Now you have high commitment to this detachment, so if you're going to figure it out, you might get burned at first, and obviously the hobbying time behind it, collecting behind it, and figuring it out sometimes more than others, we're going to take high commitment. And the exclusivity of the detachment means really you're just doing boys, so that can be somewhat unappealing as well. Now the keys to victory are the CP management. This detachment is deceptively hungry for CP. You do have an enhancement to assist with that. Typically throw it on your weird boys. You can get it on a 3+. That's an interesting appealing enhancement, of course, because this detachment is so hungry on CP. So your ability to manage it and keep regenning units with the pain boys, re-rolling wounds in combat, that's all going to matter a lot in this detachment. And of course, throwing grenades just to try to get any damage you can get off sometimes when you can. The wall timing, if the enemy baits it out of you too early than you really want, that could be a problem. A lot of the time, this is another turn 3 WAAAGH kind of detachment where it really likes to WAAAGH right in the mid game, get its stat line highest peak up where everything has an invul now, and possibly feel no pains on the most valuable important units. I've over the midway line, and now we're really stuck in. That's where you really want to call your WAAAGH, and it feels best, but some matchups might call you to call it turn 2. WAAAGH timing is super important and something that you'll look back, scratch your head, and be like, dang, I really should have WAAGH'd this turn, or dang, I really shouldn't have WAAGH'd this turn. And that's something you figure out the more you get repetitions in. So of course, be on the lookout for more Green Tide videos, as you got to get stuck inland, and it's the rise of the Green Tide. As we move on to last, but certainly not the least among the Ork detachments, the War Horde. So now War Horde is everybody's favorite, and there's a good reason for that, and I'm not going to deny that at all, but I'm also going to, encourage we still keep our eyes open for every detachment other than this, but there's good reason why everybody's promoting it. It's not just hype. So the focus of this detachment typically is actually just volume, mass infantry, and it's quite generic. The focus is that there is not too much of a focus other than what has the most punches and the ability to peak the stat lines in this detachment in combat. So the focus of it is the genericness behind it, and the fact that it gives a lot of different units options. So the valuable units in this detachment are typically knobs, breaker boys, Ghazghkull, Thraka, shines and thrives on the one. This detachment like no other in the codex. Beast bosses really, really peak their damage here for critical 5+, Snagas in Gaz's aura for lethal 5+, aura, re-rolling to the hit roll to fish for 5s on plus for criticals. Lethals is amazing and will help really deliver that killing blow. The wall timing on this army is really the back-breaking blow of this detachment. Sometimes you can be forced into it early, and you just have to really just devastate the army as best you can, and then stage up behind terrain or in safe spots as you await the enemy onslaught. I hope you can continue momentum, but typically it's about when the enemy makes a mistake that you can just break their back and put a killing blow, and you hope that they run out of assets as you lower the amount of units you have, as you'll run out of momentum. So this is one of the most generic and well-known Ork detachments because its fundamental understanding of this detachment is innate to the faction, right? So this detachment has been found throughout multiple codexes where what we understand as sustained sixes or critical sixes has been here since I started 40K 8th edition, where it was Goths, and there what it was. That's why this is known as a Goth detachment. So the more you understand this, that's the strength of this detachment, is a long-term investment understanding orcs. The understanding is volume is king, threat saturation is king, and that getting the most out of your trash units or just your units as a whole, like a unit of Ork Boys, feels no other in Warhorde, when you're just like, oh, my knob landed 2 sustains, and all my boys threw a bunch of 6s, and oh my gosh, I'm punched up. I just killed 3 Gravis Inceptors with my unit of boys. Yeah, this happened several times to me. And you just catch the enemy off guard. You're like, my boy just spiked. I get enough 6s. You just died. Because volume is king for orcs. Also, the fact that you get fight on death, so you get nasty trades, means you understand that the fundamentals of trading system for orcs is very important to us. So it does what we want to do, and it gives us some speed that other detachments don't give us. So it feels great. The inclusivity behind this detachment, that is not so restrictive or limited with keywords like other detachments, gives it the most reign on intermediate beginner players, or even people that just don't like to bring the redundant 333. They're just like, well, this detachment allows me to just bring some offset units that get a lot of punches, and I'll still bring them anyways. And the damage potential, the fact that sustained 6s throughout the game means everybody gets the ability to spike damage, and then built-in 5+ from Unbridled Carnage, and just for 1 CP means that anybody can kind of really go off throughout the game, and it feels great. Now, we also have the weaknesses. There's no Dakka support, so any Dakka you bring might end up feeling like a tax, because sometimes you're like, oh, it did absolutely nothing. I should have just brought more stuff to charge and get places and saturate the enemy with small chaff units so they run out of activations, and then that unit continues to run up the field and punch them. Sometimes, because there's no Dakka support, your Dakka could just fall flat, and then it feels like an investment waste. Maybe like 5-man unit of flash kits feel great. I mean, 5-man units of flash kits feel great for SWAT teams, but then on that wall turn, they just absolutely shot nothing. And when they punched, they just kind of more got in the way. Therefore, they weren't feeling good because they had no Dakka support like other detachments. And you're just like, well, I should have just brought more boys and just try to sticky and try to get more punches in. Of course, CP manipulation, when you run into like a Bjorn the Fell-Handed, where Bjorn the Fell-Handed, where he just kind of stands in the middle of the field as a dreadnought, and he's like, well, I'll just have an aura of now your fight on death 3 CP and your Unbridled Carnage 2 CP, or you get like a nice little lone op character that you don't have any bombs quick access to him. He just messes up the whole mid-table combat phase. He really offsets your WAAAGH, and now you're on the back foot. That's obvious. That's common. Becoming more common throughout the edition. Sorry, I don't know how to brain fart right there. With lone op assassins, you have CSM character. What's his brain? Cypher. And of course, like I said, Bjorn the Fell-Handed. So any kind of CP manipulation really hurts you as an Orc player in this attachment. And then the fact that they're expected, the fact that a lot of the best players in 40K are just experienced people in your local meta, know exactly what Warhorde does, know exactly what wants to do. They understand melee pressure. They've played a bunch of world leaders a bunch of times, and they see that this is trying to do a similar kind of thing. So they set layers of screens. They bait you into those screens, or you misposition a little bit. They pop your trucks a little too early. They clean up a little bit too much of your assets. You now have to WAAAGH turn 2. They've set up screens for that, and then the game kind of continues that way. So because the enemy's so familiar with the detachment, they know how to counter it, which means you have to become even more proficient at it, even though it's not hard to figure out in a linear way. So keys to victory is WAAAGH timing, and understand that volume is king. So CP management, volume is king, and WAAAGH timing are a huge deal on Warhorde. But because there's so many stratagems that are appealing, because the enhancements can be used in a variety of ways, Warhorde has its depth and can be really appealing to a large variety or spectrum of skilled Orc players. So no reason to hate on it, but no reason to be stuck on it. But Warhorde is here to stay because it's the generic way to get stuck in, lads. So with that being said, be on the lookout for more Warhorde style videos. And as we do more detachment breakdowns in depth, these were just a quick breakdown of familiarity. But Warhorde's fun, so don't be afraid. With that being said, that was a quick recap faction breakdown of all the Ork detachments. Just keep in mind, guys, that before Grotmus happened, before our broken detachments, quote unquote, that ended up taking big nerfs, is Orks were already in a great spot with awesome detachments, and the WAAAGH timing changed itself, right? The fact that we can call it on our turn was a huge change that we really didn't get to explore with the depth of our codex before we just got fully invested in tank busters and the 2 new Dakka detachments of More Dakka and Tactical, right? So if you're someone that just loved playing the other detachments and you got swayed by all the new gets, just stick back to finding 1 or 2 things that you really want to play and you really want to get familiar with. Of course, find a couple detachments that you want to remember and get familiar with, because the timing of your resources and the utilization of your CP and when to call your WAAAGH are dependent on your familiarity with the detachment and those data sheets that are in your list. Therefore, keep playing it, have some redundancy, and don't just jump between 4, 5, 3 different detachments and 8 different lists. This is a lesson that no matter how long you've been in 40K, I know you're stuck going back and forth, which what do I want to play right now? Hopefully this helps you with it. And this is the way that I help solve this problem for myself, is I just pick a couple things I really want to play. And that's the way I play. So with that being said, I'm gonna look at the super chats. This is live, so say what you guys want to say, and I'll read the comments. But of course, we got to start off with the most supportive get ever, Andrew Stone. On ever, but we have a lot of really supporting gets, but the ones consistently every week we're seeing this get. Andrew Stone with $20 super chat, very humbling of me, very humbling for me to see this sort of thing, because it means a lot. He says, may not make it tonight. T for the loot. Whoa. So thank you very much, Andrew. And of course, you'll be missed. But of course, the rewatch gang kick in. So thank you a lot for that. And yeah, headbutt, brother. I appreciate that. And to anybody, to any level that you guys contribute, it matters, because it's a good indication that we're trying. So if you can't support in that way, leave a like, subscribe, and if I did bad, if I didn't answer your questions effectively, a waste of your time, leave me a dislike and talk crap in the comments. That way I know how to improve, right? So let me look at some of these comments. And remember, this was in the beginning of, we're going to go back and break down all the Ork detachments, because this is the home of the WAAAGH. So every Ork detachment is going to get love, no matter how proficient or competitive it is. So everybody gets their fix, and you can find all of that here on WAAAGH Tactics. So if you didn't know, now you know. What other you guys saying? What's the best detachment for a 6th edition AdMech guard player to be playing? Or Taktikal Brigade. Then we have, and then if you guys know how I feel about Breaker Boys, I say it's naturally dependent, but a lot of the time I like to bring a Warboss. And yeah, shout out to the Bully Boys, right? We get some Bully Boy love. Whoa, right? If I told you guys that you got double WAAAGH 2 years ago, you call me a liar. You know how I know that? Because you guys did call me a liar when I said that we were going to get 2 WAAAGHs when we got the Codex. And just so you know, for anybody, Mandos just means commandos. That's the nickname here, and it takes up less space on my screen. So there we go. Yeah, Mandos, Kult of Speed is a passion project, right? And that's something that low key we're working on. Shout out to my boy Kevin. He hooked me up with more Def Countess, and now I have access to Maximum. And he wants to play. I want to play with them. So the video here is also speaking to myself. This is all around the thing, right? Like any great WAAAGH, your WAAAGH energy fuels me, and I fuel you, hopefully. And therefore, this is a therapeutic conversation for all of us. Gets on all levels. What detachment do we want to play? And this is the advice I take for myself, and some of the best players I know take for themselves. So shout out to them kids. And yeah, I do think Def Dreads with Burner Boys is kind of sick. If you just have a bunch of them in the assault for More Dakka, and then you have access to some WAAAGH, not the most appealing for a lot of people, but it's appealing for some of you crazy people that just want to do it. And yeah, if the Big Mac could join Killer Cans, just speaking of guys, that'd be sick. But I think people kind of forget sometimes that you can flick the Big Mac with like Breaker Boys, for example, and then you give them additional AP and you have -4 AP. That's fun. And good. What's up? Shout out to Slam Sector. Whoa, to you, Gits. Yeah, you guys have been going up. I see your numbers popped up in your bat reps. Check them out. Those guys are cool Gits. Yeah, for sure. Bully Boys are good for starter players, or just people that just really want to get like a linear game plan. I'm just gonna get stuck in, get some fights in, understand combat, enjoy my mega knobs, love it. So we got a super chat, Mother Blood Moons. You guys, shout out to you lads, the boss, Mr. Stone Energy, the tactics, objective markers, and other sneaky gubbins. Thank you there for the shout out you get. Much love to you. Whoa, for the Mother Mouth Blood X. Red ones. Oh, of course. What's up, Mick Fatson? Mick Fatson. What detachment if I'm kit bashing looted vehicles? Ooh, I would say the buggies. not because you can use looted vehicles keyword necessarily. It depends on like on how much you're trying to loot vehicle keyword, right? A lot of the time you're going to be sticking guns on them, so you can kind of just call those looted vehicles certain buggies, and kind of flex them based off, you know, as the additions continue, where you're like, well, this weird looking looted vehicle is actually a Boom Dakka snaz wagon. As long as they're kind of similar and similar to size to a buggy, and buggies are on pretty giant bases, you can make a lot of different looted vehicles work. Now, is that the most proficient? Not right now as a B, but you know, in 9th edition, buggies were crazy, and there's still time to be side guys. It's not doom and gloom. Remember, as Ork players, we're in here for the long haul, right? As you play what you want to play in Kit Bash and paint what you want to paint, you gotta understand that sometimes it's just opportunity. Like how efficient the stop is right now, how much gameplay it has right now, there's just opportunity. You know, if it's painted, ready to go, then you can really take it to events and go crazy. That's sometimes how it is in Ork player. You just kind of paint, keep it going. That's why I'd never want you guys to get discouraged or follow in kind of meta, because as you fill out your army and your detachment, when something is sick, you really good rules. Let's just say you played More Dakka, right? Something that I enjoyed that I had More Dakka is my walkers were ready to go. So I was having a great time with More Dakka because I already had walkers and I could take advantage of Sustain 2 that didn't feel like a broken, painful way for everybody that's getting involved. So I found my own way to play. So even when the army's most broken, you can still enjoy it in your own way if you just have options of stuff that's painted up. And that's really what the benefit of is into being a long-term committed org player, is that we just have a boatload of choices. So yeah, that's the choices for the looted wagon. So with that being said, you kids, I hope this helped motivate you guys, push you guys in some sort of direction, and leave in the comments which detachment you want to cover first. Whatever ones get the most likes and the most attentions will be the ones that go first. So of course, you guys got to fight each other. It's the wall of the it's the fight of the clans right now to dictate which way this walk goes for some of its content. So with that being said, there's only one thing to keep in mind is don't cross our wall because we'll knock your teeth out. Whoa.